Oh yeah, Chem 4860. So we're going to have a couple videos for process safety management. Next week we're going to try to meet face to face using Blackboard Ultra. But I wanted to offer you two presentations that you can watch, and then it will be a short quiz posted later today. You will have all week to take it. But it will have to deal with process safety management of highly hazardous chemicals. And this is 29 Code of Federal Regulations 1910.119. So what is PSM and who is covered by the standards? And I'm going to list the elements of the process safety management standards. So those are our objectives for this presentation. So what PSM is, it addresses the management of highly hazardous chemicals. It integrates three things: technology, operating procedures, and standard management protocols. So why did OSHA develop process safety management? And that is a result of three different things: past disasters, current disasters, which are still happening today. Just look at the Chemical Safety Board website and you'll see. And then perceived weaknesses in PSM program. So there was programs in place before, but not a uniform program like process safety. So again, these are some examples of some incidents that happened before the standard went in place. We talked about Bhopal, the first week of class in 1984. Other accidents in Pasadena, Texas in 1989. Cincinnati, Ohio in 1990, and Sterlington, Louisiana in 1991. So these accidents are still happening today. So again, also in 1991, OSHA and EPA respectively released the standards, Process Safety Management and RMP, that is Risk Management Plan. And the difference is Process Safety Management protects workers. It is an OSHA standard. Risk Management Plan protects those who are living around plants, people in the community. So again, to continue our discussion of why process safety management, again, it was resulting from incidents like 1984 and Bhopal. And the goal of PSM is to prevent releases of toxic, reactive, flammable, or explosive chemicals. So again, what RMP, Risk Management Plan, Risk Management Plan is actually part of the Clean Air Act. So we talked about that early in the semester, just to clarify that. So what's the difference? PSM is like HASCOM. HASCOM falls under OSHA. It protects the workforce, protects contractors, protects visitors to the facility, and basically protects the workplace. Again, it is an OSHA standard. RMP is something that is kind of like EPCRA. It protects the community, protects the general public around the facility, and protects adjacent facilities like hospitals and schools. So that's the difference. Very simple, very simple, but yet important difference that I want you to understand. So the standard, this was passed back in 1981, about nearly 30 years ago. Is it working? Again, you'll see when you look at your presentations at the Chemical Safety Board, you'll find that there are issues that it is not working. There definitely needs to be change involved. So again, just to clarify, in March 2000 or 2005, you can see there was an incident at a BP Products Texas City facility where 15 workers were killed, 170 injured, major property damage of over $50 million. Again, these are the elements of the PSM standard, and there are quite a few. So you have application, exclusions, definitions, employee participation, hazards of the process, toxicity, technology of the process, equipment in the process, mechanical integrity, inspection and testing, quality assurance, process hazard analysis, which is the, we call that PHA, that is the heart of the standard, management of change, operating procedures, safe work practices, training, contractor management, emergency planning and response, incident investigation, compliance audits, and trade secrets. So we're going to talk about pretty much all of these. We're going to start first with mechanical integrity, and then go on to management of change, and then operating procedures, training, employee participation, contractor management, pre-startup safety review before you start a process up, hot work permit, emergency planning and response, equipment in the process, inspection and testing, and so on. So we're going to discuss these parts of the PSM program in detail. And I did, back in my days as an engineer, I did write a process safety management plan for a facility in Pennsylvania. So let's explore some of that. So let's look at the application. So what facilities are covered? Those who use chemicals in Appendix A. This is on the PSM OSHA website. Again, examples of such chemicals are anhydrous ammonia and chlorine. And there is a number. It's called threshold quantity. So for anhydrous ammonia, if you have 10,000 pounds or more on site, you must adhere to a PSM plan. In chlorine, if you have 1,500 pounds on site, you must have a PSM plan in place. That lists all previous previous parts that we just discussed. So again, to continue, what facilities are covered? A process which involves a flammable liquid on site in one location in quantity of 10,000 pounds, so gasoline, diesel fuel, etc. Must have a PSM plan in place. So important interpretation. OSHA interprets on-site in one location to mean the standard applies when a threshold quantity of the highly hazardous chemical exists within an area under the control of an employer, or a group of affiliated employers. So it also applies to any group of vessels that are interconnected or in separate vessels that are close in proximity that the highly hazardous chemical could be involved in the potential catastrophic release. So there's something called a Muir decision. The Muir ruling in the Muir memorandum addressed in the Secretary's letter from OSHA, the OSHA's enforcement policy, that the agency would not cite employees for violations where stored flammable liquids in atmospheric tanks were connected to a process unless the process outside of the amount in storage contained more than 10,000 pounds of the substance. So what type of industries do we need to talk about? So these are anything that contain highly hazardous chemicals: industrial organics and inorganics, paints, pharmaceuticals, adhesives, sealants, fibers, petrochemicals and facilities, paper mills, food processing. I did I did 2 PSM plans, one for a food processor because they're using anhydrous ammonia in the refrigeration plant. So there are exclusions. The employer is exempt from PSM when a threshold quantity of flammable liquids is stored in atmospheric tanks or transferred without the benefit of chilling or refrigeration. Hydrocarbon fuels used solely for purpose of consumption. For example, propane used for comfort heating, gasoline for vehicle refueling. If such fuels are not part of a process containing another highly hazardous chemical covered in the standard. Retail facilities, oil and gas wells, servicing, and normally unoccupied facilities are not covered. Employee participation. So now we know we're required to comply. What do we do? So you need a team, from process engineers to operators to safety to maintenance to management to consultants. You can't do this all alone. So you form a plan. So you need to know what responsibilities there are, what duties, reporting, document control, process reports, tracking changes. Then you begin the process of developing and implementing the PSM plan. So what are the hazards? So chemicals in your process, you need to know those, obviously, for other environmental laws as well. Process chemistry, quantity of chemicals, and this is in pounds, and then you compare that to Appendix A on the OSHA PSM website. You compare that to threshold quantities, the TQs. So you need to also know toxicity information. You need to know information from SDSs or MSDSs. You can use other pocket references, other references like the NIOSH Pocket Guide, AG American Council of Government Industrial Hygienists Threshold Limit Values, which we talked about. Basically, that's our PEL for us. And the technology of the process. So you need to know block Again, hopefully you have this for your process before you get started. Block flow diagrams, process chemistry, maximum intended inventory, upper and lower limits, consequences of deviation. Other things you need to know, you have a process and instrumentation diagram, materials of construction of various boilers, other tanks, electrical classification, relief system design, ventilation system design codes, material and energy balances, which chemical engineers are really good at. Hopefully you have these before you're going to have these before you even think about a process safety management plan. And then safety systems, what systems are in place. So equipment in the process. So now you need to identify each piece of equipment. So you need to know what each piece of equipment, where it's at, what it is. You need to have specification drawings, everything. Identify each piece of equipment in the process, covered by the process and instrumentation diagram, block diagram, and number them. Remember, you must follow form, and you must be able to track each through the entire program. So mechanical integrity. So you must have, for each piece of process equipment, you must have documentation noting the design and fabrication of each. So you see the example here. It is a fabrication and assembly of pressurized piping at this facility, Middletown, actually, Ohio. Process hazard analysis. This is the most difficult yet most important part of the standard. So PHA is a dynamic, which means it's always changing. It's subject to revision whenever you make changes. It's performed by your PSM team, which you put together. This is, like I said, this is not a one-person effort. So this takes significant time and effort, and PHAs, process hazard analysis, are never ending. So what a process hazard analysis, it must be performed in each element of the covered process. So a PHA, you have to look at block diagrams, every equipment component, to see what would happen if that element in that process might fail. So much more of PSM. You have inspection and testing, you got quality assurance, you got management of change, you got operating procedures, you got safe work practices, you have training, you have contractor management, you have emergency planning, incident investigation, compliance, audits, and trade secrets. So there are procedures in place to manage what we call manage change. We call management of change. The exception is replacement in kind. If you put a same piece of equipment in place of the equipment that you took out, it is not necessary to do this. So management of change can include any time you change process chemicals, you change technology, you change equipment with different equipment, you change operating procedures, and the facility changes. So what management of change addresses, it's a technical basis of the change. And it looks at the impact to employee safety and health, modification to employee operating procedures, time period for change, and authorization. So what you need to do is you need to develop and implement written operating procedures that are clear instructions for all expected phases of operations. So this is also known as standard operating procedures and must cover, in the minimum, operating phase, operational limits, safety and health considerations. So operating procedures must address all of these: initial startup, operations, temporary operations, emergency shutdowns. So if you know a hurricane is coming, or a situation like we're facing now, some plants are being shut down, some are not. Normal shutdown, start up following turnaround, consequences of deviation, steps required to correct or revert deviation. SOPs must be readily available to all employees. They must be reviewed as needed to ensure they reflect current operating practice. And they must cover process chemicals, technology and equipment, and facilities. And SOPs must be certified annually that they are correct and that they are accurate. Safe work practices. These must be developed and implemented to provide for the control of hazards during work activities such as lockout, tagout, confined space entry, opening processes, piping your equipment, SWPs are for operators, maintenance personnel, contractors, lab personnel, or other support personnel. Training is also required. It must cover safety and health hazards associated with the covered process. The HAZCOM standard under OSHA still applies, but may overlap with this standard. It must cover also safe work practices. And refresher training is required every 3 years or as needed to ensure employees are complying with all PSM requirements. Contractors are if you go to a facility, if you will work at a facility, especially a large facility, you may see a lot of contractors there. Contractors involved in or around covered processes must be informed of required PSM elements. They're going to be working there. They must know. Contract work includes maintenance and repair, which happens a lot, turnaround, major renovations, specialty knowledge or services. It does not include support services that are involved with a covered process like laundry or vending machine supply, obviously. Emergency action plans, EAPs, there must be an EAP for the entire facility. EAPs must have provisions for small releases of HACs, develop an early warning method for releases, train on the meaning of the alarms, and develop emergency evacuation written plans and evacuation maps and assembly points. Incident investigations must be initiated as soon as possible, but within at least 48 hours. Team must include person knowledgeable in the process involved, includes contractor if work of the contractor is involved, and includes other persons with appropriate knowledge of the covered process. Incident investigation report must be produced with the following: date of the incident, date of the start of the investigation, description of incident, factors contributing to the incident, recommendations. System must be established to promptly address recommendations and findings of report. And resolutions and corrective actions must be documented. And then a compliance audit to ensure that everything is going correctly. To ensure that PMS is effective, employees must certify every 3 years, just like training, that they have evaluated compliance with the standard. It must be completed by at least one person knowledgeable in the process. Report must be developed and documented. Deficiency corrections must be documented. And last 2 compliance audits must be kept on file. For trade secrets, employers must make all necessary information required to comply with PSM, regardless of trade secrets, available to persons involved in developing or creating, compiling process safety information, process hazard analysis, standard operating procedures, incident investigations, emergency planning and response, compliance audits, and confidentiality agreements are allowed. But employers must make all necessary information required to comply with PSM, regardless of trade secrets, to all people involved in the process. And then to kind of discuss the BP Texas City Refinery case, it's the 3rd largest petroleum refinery in the United States. It can produce about 475,000 barrels of crude per day, not gallons. It's located on a 1,200-acre facility in Texas City, Texas, near in Galveston County, near Houston. About 1,200 people work here, and additional contractors. So, what goes wrong in a disaster? So we want to think about what went wrong, what went right, what should have been done to prevent this disaster. So, what was cited in the refinery, the U.S. Department of Labor proposed $87 million in penalties against BP. Now again, these things don't just happen. So there was prior history. Previously, there was an explosion and fire at another plant, in an isomerization plant, and where people also were hurt and were killed. So you can see these things don't just happen. So after the BP accident, have we learned anything about process safety management? So now, in spite of efforts, there is something wrong. The status quo isn't working. So in the past 3 months alone, 58 workers have died. You can check out the CSP website for that. So OSHA is concerned about the recent number of serious accidents at a refinery where workers get scalded, burned, or struck down. So there's much more to PSM. Now the OSHA PSM, National Emphasis Program for Refineries and Chemical Facilities, and so there's a Severe Violator Enforcement Program. So with the OSHA National Emphasis Program, it's issued August 2009, and then the Chemical Facilities NEP, Petroleum was issued August 2009. The Chemical Facilities NEP, National Emphasis Program, was issued in July 2010. So typical standards cited, lockout, tagout, PSM. These are general OSHA requirements. HASCOM, HAZWOPER, confined space, general duty, which means the employer must do everything they can to protect the worker, and hazardous locations, 1810.307. So most frequent NEP PSM citations, EDC operating procedures, 38, PHAs, management of change, etc. So the Severe Violator Enforcement Program, this instruction establishes enforcement policies and procedures for OSHA's Severe Violator Enforcement Program, which concentrates resources on inspecting employers who have demonstrated indifference, which they don't care, to the OSHA Act. So this is by willful, repeated, or failure to comply with the OSHA enhanced OSHA standards. So again, an example was at a refinery in August 18th, 2009. The Severe Violator Program, OSHA, bottom line is OSHA is serious about compliance and enforcement of process safety management. So for severe violator, there's enhanced follow-up inspections, nationwide inspection of other related workplaces and work sites. So if one facility for a big company is non-compliance, OSHA will go around to other parts of the country, different states. They want to increase company awareness of OSHA enforcement, all OSHA enforcement, not just process safety management, and enhance settlement provisions. So what is RMP? EPA's Risk Management Plan. So remember, PSM is OSHA, RMP is EPA. It's all covered under the, kind of oddly, it's covered under the Clean Air Act. So many times companies who must comply with PSM must also comply with RMP. The RMP standard was to be a mirror of the PSM standard. That really didn't happen. Remember, PSM protects the workforce. RMP protects the community. So basic requirements: executive summary, registration, offsite consequent analysis, 5-year accident history, emergency response plan, prevention program, summary information, and certification. So you can see this is an example of a facility that you have to do this is a potential release. So the facility would be where the Skull and Crossbones is, and you can see the plume release. So all public facilities in this release plume must be identified and surveyed. And then PSM is a comprehensive, and to summarize, PSM is a comprehensive, difficult standard. It was passed in 1991. Accidents still occur. Recognizing these facts, OSHA has developed a national emphasis program for refineries and chemical manufacturers, and more emphasis planned for PSM sites. And there's much more to be done. And RMP also is considered for many facilities. So you can go to the following websites. I got a lot of information from Georgia Tech. There's good information if you go to the OSHA site and actually the Chemical Safety Board website. But the PSM checklist under the Georgia Tech site is really good. And then here's a PSM checklist. So it looks at who is responsible for developing and implementing each of the program requirements, what are the basic elements, when are the required actions for each element completed and when were they required to complete, where have actions been implemented or changed, why, and how. So I thank you for watching this presentation. It was a little shorter than I expected. I will be available today from 5 to 6 to answer any of your questions. Otherwise, we'll meet face-to-face next week. There is a quiz that you will take after this that is about process safety management. If you have any questions, please contact me by email or phone.